So before we talk about how to save a gallbladder or how to get rid of gallstones so you don't have gallbladder attacks, if you haven't already, jump over and watch our video on understanding gallbladder attacks. If you haven't already seen that, a lot of this stuff isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. You really need to understand why these things happen so you understand the steps that you're going to have to take. So just pause this video and go watch that first, and then we'll send you back over here. Now, if you've already seen that, we're going to talk about steps that you can take on your own to save a gallbladder. But just know that that doesn't mean that you're going to save a gallbladder. If there's like major infection, gangrene stuff going on, that thing's going to have to come out. If you have a lot of stones or like really big stones that are going to be too hard to really melt down and clear out of there, you might have to get it taken out. But if you do, you'll just have to deal with those ramifications. What's important to understand is there absolutely are ramifications, and you want to understand that. A lot of times when somebody's having any type of gallbladder discomfort at all, the doctor's going to say, oh, well, let's yank that out. I get $17,000 if we yank that out. Let's go that path. And their feeling is that the gallbladder doesn't really do anything. But you need to understand that this is part of your digestive process. And when your digestive process is not working correctly, it's going to create some problems. So you need to understand the stuff that we talk about in our Trouble from Gallbladder Removal video. And we'll put the link to that video in the description below so you can check that out and just know what you're signing up for. Again, you may need to sign up for that, but you want to know what you're getting into, because once the gallbladder is gone, a person is either going to have symptoms for the rest of their life, or they're going to have to take additional steps for the rest of their life. Otherwise, problems are going to show up in most cases sooner or later. So just know that you can do this. I hear from a lot of people who have been able to correct the problems that were giving the gallbladder trouble and save their gallbladder from needing to be removed. I don't want you to think that this is going to be easy and that you can have everything fixed by Thursday so you can have a great time at the Monster Truck Rally on Friday, but you can do this. So let's get at it.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So as we start to look at these steps to make this save, you're really going to have to determine what steps are most important for you and your unique bio-individuality, and am I willing to take these steps? Am I willing to put in this effort? And whether a doctor is going to get $17,000 for taking out your gallbladder or not, I have no idea. Just, it's the only thing that's in their training, so that's the only move they have. So that's what they're going to want to do. So you might have to make your own decisions and decide, okay, I have this on the back burner. I have the ability to have this removed, but what can I do while I'm waiting for that moment? I can take steps on my own to see if I create any improvement. And that's kind of what we'll talk about here. So before we get into some of these steps that you want to implement to see if you can thin this bile out and get it flowing, we want to look at the things that you really have to stop. Because in order to get these stones melted down, you really have to have flow in there. You have to have movement. If the gallbladder bile is stagnant and it's not really moving anywhere, then they're just going to continue to get bigger as everything concentrates and concentrates in there. You really have to have flow and movement to be able to get those things to melt down, to become smaller, and be able to pass through and be able to pass those stones successfully. So the first thing we have to look at is the fact that grains and processed foods seem to have the ability to thicken up bile and keep it from flowing correctly. So we need to find ways to remove that. Now, if that sounds insane to you, just know that it's totally a possibility. People do it all the time. People start doing this thing where they eat real food. I know that sounds crazy, but that's really what you want to do to improve a lot of health issues. Your body understands what food is and it can do things with food. So we want to eat real food every chance that we can get. Now that doesn't mean you can never eat a grain again, but you want to put as many things as you can in your favor. You want to put a lot of effort into this and put everything you can in your favor to make this happen. And if you're like, wait a minute, the pyramid says that I should have heart-healthy whole grains every day, and just know that that's fiction. It was a wrong, it was a mistake, it was not the right thing, and we understand that now, but it takes a long time for new information and new science to catch up to the mainstream. So if you still feel like whole grains are healthy, know that that's a mistake, and you're going to want to look into getting away from that type of thinking. The next thing we want to look at is not eating low fat anymore. If you're still eating low fat, you really want to get some fats into your diet. Now, if you're creating major gallbladder symptoms every time you consume fats, you may need to take some of these steps down here that we talk about when we'll get to the implements section. But know that as you implement these things, you're also going to want to implement more dietary fats to kind of trigger this gallbladder to, hey, I need to go into action. I need to kind of try the best I can to get some things flowing. And as you take these steps to thin the bile out, then that's going to work a little bit better. The next thing you want to look at is high estrogen issues and things that can cause high estrogen. If you're on some type of birth control, if you're on some type of estrogen therapy, you're going to want to talk to your doctor and say, hey, what other options do I have? I feel like these things are thickening my bile and creating more trouble. And he'll go, ha, 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 what does that even mean? We don't even need the gallbladder. But you'll have to make your own decisions of what you want to listen to there. And we need to remove the things that are raising estrogen and stress hormones. So if you looked at your blood pressure like we talked about in that last video, and your systolic number was lower than 112, then you really want to take steps to raise your mineral level. So check out our video on how to boost minerals, and you can take steps there to give your body more resources so that it doesn't continue to raise these stress hormones that can thicken up your bile. The next thing we want to look at is, do we have a catabolic imbalance? Are we leaning too far on that catabolic side when it comes to our circadian rhythm? So our video on how to know if your circadian rhythm is off will kind of walk you through simple things you can do at home to figure out, am I leaning too far on that catabolic side? And if I am, you can take steps to improve that. And what's really cool is that some of the steps to improve this catabolic imbalance are like increasing your saturated fat intake, like butter and coconut oil and heavy cream. Those things contain saturated fats that are pro-anabolic, which means that they can help correct a catabolic imbalance. And while you're doing that, you're also adding more fats. So you can see that some of these steps can end up helping each other. Now, are you leaning too far on that insulin resistance side? Well, you can just look at your fasting glucose at home with a glucometer you pick up at the pharmacy for $30 or $40. And if your fasting glucose is over 100, that's a strong indication that you're starting to lean a little bit more on that insulin resistance side. And you're going to want to check out our video on how to fix insulin resistance so you can start taking steps to improve that issue. One of those issues that you will end up taking, if that's the problem, is improving a catabolic imbalance, if that's an issue for you as well. Those things can really go hand in hand. Just know that when we're looking at these things that we can implement, a lot of times doing the wrong thing is going to cause a lot more trouble than doing the right thing. A lot of times it's the wrong things that are really blocking the ability to see results. So that's why I put these first. These are the priority here, is stop doing the stuff that's causing the trouble. And then when we start implementing things, it can really help turn some things around. Okay, so when it comes to things that we can implement, nothing is going to be as important as getting the bile thinned out so that it can flow correctly. And it would be awesome if there was just foods that you could just eat that would fix that. I think it would be glorious. But the reality is you're going to have to use some supplements to make this happen. A lot of times you can't really get the nutrients out of food when digestion isn't working correctly. And if your bile isn't flowing correctly, you're not creating that sizzle that helps us bust the food apart and really get all the nutrients out of that food. As a matter of fact, if bile's not flowing, it's really hard to assimilate fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, K, things that are really crucial for a lot of bodily functions. So you're probably going to have to take some supplements and take some other steps to really thin the bile out. And know that when there are stones and someone's having, gallbladder pain, they're going to have to really be aggressive with these steps to turn this thing around. So what you're going to have to do is we're going to put the link in the description below, and I'll send you to this video at the end of this video too, because this is going to be the most important steps. But you're going to want to watch our video on 5 steps to thin bile so that you can get it flowing correctly. And some of these things you're not going to want to do. Like, I don't want to do coffee suppositories or coffee enemas. Nobody wants to put stuff up the back door. But the reality is that you can take steps and you can use supplements that can thin the bile so that it can flow a little bit better. But a lot of times if there's a stone kind of blocking one of these biliary pathways, you need to dilate that pathway and open it up. And coffee enemas and coffee suppositories are the best way to make that happen. So in that video, you'll learn supplements that you can use and how to figure out which one of those supplements is appropriate for your body chemistry. And you can do those steps to thin the bile and get it going, but you may also need to do some things to dilate that biliary pathway, and you might not like them. But the reality is when you understand the trouble that can come if you lose your gallbladder, it becomes worth it. It becomes worth the extra effort to take those steps. So another thing that you want to think about is that for some people, they may not be producing enough bile. So the small amount of bile that they're producing is stagnating in this gallbladder and over-concentrating and creating those stones. Now this is more rare, but it is possible. So what a person can do is they can supplement with ox bile away from their meals, not with the meal, but it wants to be after the meal, like an hour or two after a meal. That way the food has time to acidify in the stomach before you put ox bile in that's going to neutralize all those acids. But if somebody supplements with ox bile, that can stimulate the body to produce more bile if it's not producing enough. And if your bile really isn't flowing at all, it can sometimes be nice to supplement with a little ox bile just to give you kind of like a simulated version of digestion, to give you some bile to help you emulsify your dietary fats, help you get a little bit of that sizzle that can help you break that food apart and digest it and get a little more nutrients out of it. So that can be beneficial. Just understand that that's not how you fix it. Some people say, oh, just take ox bile and that'll fix it. It really doesn't. It doesn't do anything to thin the bile if you're producing enough bile and the bile is just too thick and sticky to flow correctly. It only helps if someone is not producing enough bile. So another step that can be important is to drink more water. Water helps give the body that flow. It helps give the body enough water to thin that bile out and get things moving. What you don't want to do is just go nuts and be like, hey, I'm going to have 3 gallons of water today and just do nothing but pee. Because if you're up here and you have low electrolytes when you looked at your blood pressure, then drinking a whole bunch more water is just going to magnify that problem. It's going to wash out the small amount of electrolytes you have and then stress the body out even more and raise even more stress hormones. So you really want to learn to work with your body and not just look at remedies like, oh, he says to do that, so everybody's just got to do that. You want to see what's appropriate for your body chemistry. And if you need help looking at your body chemistry, my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, walks you through how to do simple self-tests that you can do at home with tools you can pick up at a pharmacy or a health food store. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'm going to put a link in the description below this video so you can get the whole thing totally for free. And that'll also walk you through figuring out which aspects of digestion might not be working correctly and steps you can take to improve those as well. So that can be a big help for some of you. And another thing that can be very important is magnesium malate, because it's very well known that malic acid has the ability to kind of melt down gallstones. And a lot of people will say, hey, just drink all the apple juice in town. Anywhere you go where there's apple juice, just drink it all. And the problem with that is that the apple juice has a lot of sugar. And it's going to raise insulin levels, and those high insulin levels have the ability to thicken up bile a little bit. So we like to see people get their malic acid from magnesium malate when they can. Keep in mind that magnesium is very pro-catabolic. So if a person is already leaning too far on this catabolic side, then taking a lot of magnesium could really magnify that problem. So in that scenario, maybe a person can use a little bit of magnesium malate as they're taking other steps to improve a catabolic imbalance. But again, it's really about looking at your chemistry. You may be way too far on the anabolic side, and you may be able to take quite a bit of magnesium malate and not only fix that problem, but then speed up the process of melting down any gallstones. So when we're looking at what to expect this to be a little bit difficult. Expect this to be a little bit of a challenge, and for you have to put some effort into it if you've gotten to the point where you have a significant level of stones or so much sludge that you're having gallbladder pains. When you're there, there's a real problem. Most people don't know the early signs that we talk about in our 10 signs of poor bile flow to figure out that they're having trouble, way ahead of time so that they can correct it. This is a situation we're talking about here where the problem is quite significant, so you're going to have to be aggressive. Now here's something else that we want to understand when we're going to thin out this bile. Let's just say you have a bunch of stones in here like this. Well, there's a lot of these stones that are just minding their own business. Hey, I'm not causing any trouble. I'm just minding my own business, having a good time. But when you come in here and now, if this is all filled with sludged up bile, now you start to thin that bile out. Now these stones, they have the ability to move around a little bit. They might have one move up into a duct here and block that duct and create a major gallbladder attack. And then a person's like, oh man, thinning my bile gives me gallbladder attacks. And that's not what happened. There's already a significant problem here. The alternative is to do nothing, and then this will continue to get worse until it just has to be yanked out. So understand that while you're taking steps to correct the problem, you may come across an episode where a stone moves around, starts going through a tube, and maybe gets stuck somewhere and can create some significant pain. So you have to kind of be aware of that possibility and understand what to do if that happens. You know, we talked before about if somebody has a major gallbladder attack in the other video, they can sometimes do some Epsom salt with some warm water and drink that down. That's what a lot of people say is a good thing to do. I'm not telling you to do that, but we hear from a lot of people that say that that was able to pull them out of a gallbladder attack, and it gave them diarrhea in the process, but at least they pulled them out of that attack. And it seems that that Epsom salt has the ability to kind of push some things through to get through an attack. But just understand that that's kind of a risk of what you're doing if you're thinning out this gallbladder bile so that things can move. A stone might move with that, but when you understand what's going on, what choice do you really have? It's really that or get the whole thing taken out. So that's kind of what we're looking at as far as what to expect. So even though it can take some time to really melt down stones, I do hear from a lot of people who are having a lot of discomfort with their gallbladder. Then when they take all these steps to thin the bile and get things moving, they can find some relief relatively quickly. And that just means that they have things moving enough to stop having those gallbladder pains, but maybe they haven't melted down the stones all the way. Maybe that's going to take a little bit more work, but at least they're having some relief. They're digesting their food better. They're emulsifying their fats, so they're not feeling lousy after they eat fats. All those things, the benefits can come in a short period of time. It just may take longer to correct the whole situation. So you probably want to save this video so you can go down in the description and check out the other videos that might be appropriate for you and your body chemistry to kind of dig in to some of these other steps that need to be corrected. But what you want to do right now is jump over to our video on 5 steps to improve bile flow so you can get some of those steps in motion and start this process in the right direction. I can't wait to hear about your results.